Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of Family Feud episodes, but he had never encountered anything like this. When a small piece of paper fell from Sandra Williams's grandmother's wedding dress, it didn't just reveal a family secret, it shook the heart of all America. As Steve read that note aloud, he couldn't hold back his tears. The producers didn't know what to do, and everyone in the studio cried. This is the story of a grandmother's miraculous message, left for her granddaughter's wedding day. The Family Feud studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Golden lights cast their warm glow across the iconic blue and orange set, while the audience settled into their seats, anticipating another evening of laughter and friendly competition. The familiar hum of excitement filled the air as cameras positioned themselves for the perfect angles and production assistants made their final checks. Behind the scenes, Sandra Williams adjusted the vintage lace of her grandmother's wedding dress one final time, smoothing down the delicate fabric that had been carefully preserved for over 2 decades. The dress felt different somehow, heavier with memory, lighter with love. She had spent hours that morning carefully steaming out the wrinkles and ensuring every pearl button was secure. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother whispered, tears already forming in her eyes. "Grandma Rose would be so proud to see you wearing her dress." Sandra had insisted on wearing the 1954 wedding gown to her Family Feud appearance. It seemed fitting somehow, a way to honor her grandmother's memory while celebrating with her new husband David and their family. The ivory silk had yellowed slightly with age, creating a warm champagne hue that seemed to glow under the studio lights. The intricate beadwork still caught the light magnificently, each tiny pearl and crystal telling its own story of careful craftsmanship from a bygone era. Rose Williams had worn this dress when she married Sandra's grandfather in a small church ceremony in Alabama, surrounded by family and friends who had saved their pennies to attend the celebration. The dress had been Rose's mother's before that, altered and updated for each generation. It had hung in the family closet ever since Rose's passing 15 years ago, wrapped in muslin and lavender sachets, waiting for the right moment to live again. "Places, everyone," called the stage manager. "We're live in 30 seconds. Steve Harvey emerged from behind the set, adjusting his charcoal gray suit and flashing his trademark smile. He had been hosting Family Feud for over a decade, and the routine had become second nature. The jokes, the reactions, the way he could read a family's dynamic within minutes of meeting them. But as he glanced at the Williams family taking their positions at the podium, something about Sandra's dress caught his attention immediately. There was an elegance to it, a timeless quality that spoke of generations past and love that endured beyond time itself. The fabric seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, and Steve found himself wondering about the woman who had first worn it, about the dreams she had carried down that aisle decades ago. "Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Family Feud." Steve's voice boomed across the studio as the audience erupted in applause. "I'm your man, Steve Harvey, and we've got a great show for you tonight." The Williams family stood proudly at their podium. Sandra in her grandmother's wedding dress, her new husband David, her parents Robert and Maria, and her teenage brother Marcus. Across from them, the Rodriguez family waited with equal anticipation. But all eyes seemed drawn to Sandra's stunning vintage gown. "Now before we start," Steve said, walking over to the Williams family, "I have to ask about this beautiful dress. Sandra, you look absolutely radiant tonight." Sandra blushed, her hand instinctively touching the delicate lace at her neckline. "Thank you, Steve. This was my grandmother's wedding dress. She passed away 15 years ago, but I wanted her to be here with us in some way." Steve's expression softened immediately. In all his years of hosting, he had learned that behind every contestant was a story, and the best moments happened when those stories revealed themselves naturally. He had seen families celebrate victories, mourn losses, and support each other through every imaginable circumstance. But there was something about the reverence in Sandra's voice, the way she touched the dress, that told him this was different. "That's beautiful, honey. What was your grandmother's name?" Steve asked, stepping closer to the family. He could see the love and loss intertwined in Sandra's eyes, the way grief and joy could occupy the same space in a human heart. "Rose Williams," Sandra replied, her voice catching slightly. "She was the strongest woman I ever knew. She raised 7 children during the Depression and never complained about anything. She always said that family was everything." The audience murmured appreciatively, already sensing that this episode might be different from the usual lighthearted affair. Steve nodded, clearly moved by Sandra's words. "Well, I know Grandma Rose is looking down on you tonight, proud as can be," Steve said. "Are you ready to play Family Feud?" "We're ready," the Williams family shouted in unison. The first few rounds proceeded normally. The Williams family took an early lead with correct answers about things people do at weddings and gifts you might receive for your anniversary. Sandra's dress swished gracefully as she moved to the podium for each question, the vintage fabric rustling softly under the studio lights. But it was during the fourth round, when Sandra stepped forward to face off against the Rodriguez family captain, that everything changed in ways no one could have predicted. Steve was in the middle of asking a question about things a bride worries about on her wedding day, when a small folded piece of paper suddenly fluttered down from somewhere within Sandra's dress. It seemed to fall in slow motion, catching the studio lights as it descended like a feather carrying decades of secrets. The paper landed silently on the polished studio floor, yellowed with age and obviously very old, as if time itself had been waiting for this exact moment to reveal its treasure. The entire studio seemed to freeze in a moment, suspended between ordinary and extraordinary. Sandra looked down at the paper in shock, her face paling as she realized what had happened. Her hand instinctively went to her heart, and she took a small step backward, as if the weight of discovery had physically moved her. The cameras caught everything, the paper's graceful descent, Sandra's expression of pure surprise transforming into something deeper, and Steve's immediate concern as he bent down to retrieve what appeared to be a message from the past. The audience held its collective breath, sensing that they were witnessing something that transcended the boundaries of entertainment. Even the production crew, seasoned professionals who had seen every possible game show scenario, found themselves leaning forward, captivated by the unfolding mystery. "Well, now, what do we have here?" Steve said, picking up the delicate paper. It was clearly very old, the edges brown and fragile, and it was covered in careful, feminine handwriting in faded blue ink. Sandra's hand flew to her mouth. I had no idea that was there. I don't know what it is." Steve looked at the paper more closely, and his expression began to change. The studio audience fell completely silent, sensing that something profound was happening. Even the Rodriguez family stopped moving, watching intently as Steve unfolded the note with careful reverence. "Sandra," Steve said softly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "this appears to be a letter, and it's addressed to my dearest granddaughter on her wedding day." The gasp that went through the studio was audible. Sandra's mother, Maria, clasped her hands to her chest, tears immediately springing to her eyes. Robert put his arm around his wife, both of them staring at Steve in disbelief.
"Oh my God," Sandra whispered, her voice breaking. "Grandma Rose?"
Steve looked up at Sandra, then at her family, then back at the note. In 30 years of television, he had never found himself in a situation quite like this. This wasn't in any script. This wasn't part of the show format. But Steve Harvey had learned long ago that some moments transcended entertainment. "Sandra," he said gently, "would you like me to read this?" Sandra could only nod, tears already streaming down her face. The entire Williams family was crying now, and even members of the Rodriguez family were wiping their eyes. The audience sat in perfect silence, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Steve cleared his throat and began to read aloud in his deep, resonant voice. "My dearest granddaughter on her wedding day. If you are reading this, it means you have chosen to wear my wedding dress, and it means I am no longer with you to see this beautiful moment. I have sewn this letter into the lining of my dress, because I wanted to make sure that on the most important day of your life, you would know how much I love you and how proud I am of the woman you have become. When I wore this dress in 1954, I made a promise to your grandfather that I would love him with all my heart for as long as I lived. I kept that promise, and now I want to share with you the secret of a happy marriage that has sustained me through 50 years together." Steve's voice was beginning to crack with emotion, but he continued reading. "Love is not just a feeling, my darling girl. Love is a choice you make every single day. Choose to be kind when you are tired. Choose to forgive when you are hurt. Choose to laugh together when life gets hard. And always, always choose to remember that the person standing beside you is your greatest gift. I may not be there to dance at your wedding, but my love is woven into every thread of this dress. Every time you wear it, every time you touch it, remember that you carry with you the love of all the women who came before you. You are not just wearing my dress, you are wearing my dreams, my hopes, and my unending love for you. Be happy, my precious granddaughter. Be joyful, be loved, and know that somewhere, somehow I am dancing with joy, because you have found your person. All my love forever and always. Grandma Rose. P.S. I hid a little surprise in the right pocket. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and a silver sixpence for your shoe. By the time Steve finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the entire studio. Sandra was sobbing openly, supported by her husband David, while her parents held each other tightly. The Rodriguez family was crying too, and even the hardened production crew behind the cameras were wiping their eyes. Steve carefully folded the letter and looked up at Sandra. For a moment, the man who was famous for always having the perfect comeback had no words. He just stood there, holding a grandmother's love letter, watching a family experience a miracle. Sandra, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion, I think your grandmother just crashed our family feud. The audience erupted in applause, mixed with tears and laughter. Sandra reached out to Steve with shaking hands, and he carefully placed the letter in her palm. But then Sandra did something unexpected. She reached into the right pocket of the dress, just as her grandmother's letter had instructed. Her fingers found something small and hard. Slowly, she pulled out a delicate silver sixpence, tarnished with age, but still beautiful. Attached to it was another tiny note in the same careful handwriting. For luck, for love, and for all the granddaughters who will wear this dress after you. That's when Steve Harvey did something he had never done in thousands of episodes. He stepped away from his mark, walked directly to Sandra, and wrapped her in a gentle hug. The cameras kept rolling, but nobody was thinking about television anymore. This was about family, about love transcending death, and about the mysterious ways that those we've lost continue to watch over us. You know what, Steve said, stepping back and addressing the entire studio. I've been doing this show for a long time, and I've seen a lot of beautiful moments. But what just happened here? This isn't about Family Feud anymore. This is about something bigger than all of us. He turned to look directly into the camera, speaking to the millions who would eventually watch this moment. Some of y'all watching this right now, you've lost somebody special. You think they're gone. You think they can't reach you anymore. But Sandra's grandmother just proved that love doesn't end when life does. Love finds a way. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. On the back, he wrote something quickly and handed it to Sandra. This is my personal number, he said. You call me on your first anniversary. You tell me how that marriage advice is working out. You hear? Sandra clutched the card along with her grandmother's letter, nodding through her tears. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for letting her speak. No, honey, Steve said firmly. Thank you for bringing her here tonight. Thank you for showing all of us that love really is the answer to everything. He looked back at the audience, then at both families standing at their podiums. You know what? I think we need to change the rules tonight. Rodriguez family, Williams family, y'all are both winners. Because what we just witnessed here is worth more than any prize money. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. But the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the episode became the most watched Family Feud segment in the show's history. The video was shared millions of times on social media, with comments from people all over the world sharing their own stories of love, loss, and the mysterious ways their departed family members continued to communicate with them. Letters poured into the studio from viewers who had experienced similar miraculous moments. Photographs falling from books, jewelry appearing in unexpected places, dreams that felt more real than waking life. The episode sparked conversations in living rooms, churches, and coffee shops about the nature of love, the possibility of communication beyond death, and the way family bonds transcend the physical world. Therapists reported that clients were more open to discussing their grief, and funeral directors noted an increase in families choosing to incorporate meaningful heirlooms into their memorial services. Steve Harvey kept Rose Williams' story close to his heart. He had the wedding dress episode specially edited and preserved, and he often spoke about it in interviews as the moment that reminded him why his work mattered. 6 months later, Sandra called the number Steve had given her. She wanted to tell him that she and David had framed her grandmother's letter and hung it in their bedroom, where they read it together every morning. She wanted to tell him that they had started a small scholarship fund in Rose Williams's name for brides who couldn't afford wedding dresses. And she wanted to tell him that every night before bed, she thanked God for a grandmother who had found a way to attend her wedding after all. The silver sixpence now sat on Sandra's mantel next to a photo of Rose Williams in her wedding dress in 1954. And sometimes, when the light hit it just right, Sandra could swear she saw her grandmother smiling back at her, proud of the woman she had become and the love she had found. As for Steve Harvey, he learned something that day that changed how he approached every show afterward. He learned that the most powerful moments in television aren't scripted, they're felt. They happen when real life breaks through the format, when love insists on being heard, and when the people we've lost find creative ways to remind us that they're never really gone. The wedding dress hangs in Sandra's closet now, waiting for the next generation. And somewhere in its lining there might be more surprises from Grandma Rose, more ways for love to reach across time and touch the hearts of those who need it most. Because that's what love does. It endures. It surprises us. And sometimes it falls from the sky in the middle of a game show, reminding us all that the most important things in life can't be won or lost. They can only be treasured, shared, and passed down from one generation to the next. The silver sixpence gleamed in the studio lights, and somewhere in heaven, Rose Williams was dancing with joy.